what I actually put on the vocal processing chain. Stop banging into the mic. Hey, Brian Miller here, author, speaker, magician, podcast host, and audio nerd. And welcome to Audio for Content Creators, where we help you sound better and level up for all your content creation needs. This is sort of a weird little in-betweener video, but I think it might be useful for some of you out there starting podcasts or doing narration or voiceover work. I record a Thursday Thoughts episode for my podcast on the off weeks from the long-form interviews that I do. And over the last couple of months, I've played around with on my main YouTube channel, not this one, but my main Brian Miller author, speaker, magician channel, with uploading a video version as well. And this is kind of halfway in between those two, where I wanted to give you a behind-the-scenes look at what it actually looks like to record a solo podcast or a narration or a voiceover or something like that. So I'm going to let it roll in a minute. You're going to watch me just for 15 minutes. I keep banging into this. You're going to watch me, well, if you want, you have the option to watch me for like 15 or 16 minutes record what is effectively ends up being like a 6 or 7 minute piece of audio. So you'll see me stop and start over, do sentences over, try different tones and different lines and different inflections. You'll see me wait for baseboard heaters to stop clanking around in the background and take breaks for glasses of water to, re-energize my voice. So I'm just going to let this play. I hope this is interesting or useful. Hit me up in the comments if there's anything you would like to know more about any of the things you see or hear me do. And for what it's worth, if you're interested in the post-processing, just, like this video a lot and comment all over the place that you want to see me go through what I actually do to my voice, what I actually put on the vocal processing chain. Stop banging into the mic. I should have had the camera anywhere else but where it is right now. If you want to see my vocal processing chain and not just what it is, but why I chose each of the steps that I chose, then, let me know that that's something you're interested in, and maybe I'll do that. Okay, roll the video. Enjoy. Aha. This week's episode is called Neural Nostalgia and Musical Connection. Ooh. So this is usually how I'm set up. I've got the large diaphragm condenser mic here. I just want to make sure I'm actually recording. Yes, I am actually recording. So I've got my large diaphragm condenser mic here. It's very warm and buttery and crisp and beautiful. I have just a little pop filter on here, which does an okay job, but now that I'm not doing the video so much anymore, I'm going to turn it just a little bit, and I'm going to talk kind of right past it at an angle to eliminate the plosives that might get through this pop filter. I'm going to raise it up a little bit to... Typically, if the mic is above your mouth, it's going to be a warmer sound. If the mic is below your mouth, it's going to be a brighter sound. The bright sounds, the harsh sounds coming out of our mouth, they typically come up, bounce off the roof of our mouth, and come downwards. So the harsh sounds, the bright sounds come out of your mouth downward. So if you put the mic a little bit above you, you'll get a little bit of a warmer sound. If you put the mic a little bit below you, you'll get a bit of a brighter, harsher, nasally sound. Just a little tip there. All right. This is pretty much the setup I usually have, apart from all of the studio lights on to do this video right now. Normally, I'm pretty much sitting in the dark with just some ambient lighting in the background while I do this. I've got my headphones on. I can hear myself in the headphones, so I know what I sound like and, the tone, and I can use that to really lean into some of the heavy stuff and back off if I want it to be a little bit more conversational. Lots of sound panels everywhere, completely deadening this sound. For what it's worth, this is what it sounds like right now. This is what it sounds like unedited with the audio. And this is what it sounds like with the post-processing that I typically do. So here we are, absolutely raw and unprocessed. And here we are with my standard processing. So typically the way that I do this is I read the entire blog post as best I can in one shot. I only redo a sentence if I'm really unhappy with it, or if I stumbled over my words or made a weird sound with my mouth. I have some seltzer here to stay loose and hydrated. And what else? I usually do the intro and outro to the episodes at the end after I'm done, because once I'm done reading the whole thing, my brain is in a better space. Like I'm in the emotional space of the episode or of the blog or whatever. So I'm able to do the intro and outro, kind of matching the tone that I have. So, all right, here we go. I have a script up on the screen here. The script, well, it's not so much a script. This is just the blog post. And so sometimes what happens the first time I go through it is I realize that some of the way that I wrote it as a blog post, that written as text doesn't always translate to the spoken word. So occasionally I will redo a sentence out loud when I realize as I'm reading it that it doesn't work as well spoken, and I change something about it. So, let's turn the Wi-Fi off on the computer. Wi-Fi is already off on the phone. Anything that can potentially interfere, RF interference, is no good. All right, here we go. Billie Eilish, an 18-year-old singer who already has 34 music awards, recently made headlines because Jimmy Kimmel asked her to name the members of Van Halen, and she didn't even know who Van Halen was. The internet had a grand old time, as one might expect. How dare this punk kid disrespect rock royalty? I remember being that guy as a teen and young adult, a full-on music snob who scoffed at anyone listening to country, pop, hip-hop, or electronic music. If it's not four sweaty dudes banging out power chords, it's not real music. Am I right? You're telling me you don't know Baba O'Reilly? It's only one of the greatest songs ever written by the most legendary of bands, The Who. Do you live under a rock? I'm embarrassed now by how I used to act in relation to my favorite music, movies, and television. But I also understand the instinct. Our artistic tastes are not only personal, but deeply rooted in our childhood, associated with memories, nostalgia, stories, and experiences. There's even good psychological and physiological reasons for it. The music we hear during our teens activates our brain's pleasure circuits, releasing dopamine, serotonin, and other powerful drugs into our system. Psychologist Mark Joseph Stern writes, quote, "Between the ages of 12 and 22, our brains undergo rapid neurological development, and the music we love during that decade seems to get wired into our lobes for good. When we make neural connections to a song, we also create a strong memory trace that becomes laden with heightened emotion. These hormones tell our brains that everything is incredibly important, especially the songs that form the soundtrack to our teenage dreams." If you were a hormonal... baseboard's going off in the background. If you were a hormonal teenager in the late 70s and early 80s into rock music, you might think, quote, quote, I don't need quote for a song title. Baseboard heater's going off. Usually I turn the temperature in the house down pretty far, like pretty cold, so that the baseboard heaters, the heat doesn't go off while I'm doing something like this. But I forgot to, and it's cold to begin with in here, so... I might skip this part of the video for a minute just to scoot past all the baseboard heater nonsense. I'm filming this in 4K, which is going to be a nightmare for storage. I've already been filming for 10 minutes. It's a gigabyte per minute for 4K. Crazy. If you were a hormonal teenager in the late 70s and early 80s into rock music, you might think Ain't Talkin' About Love is one of the most profound songs ever written. You know, the one written by poet David Lee Roth. And there's nothing wrong with that. In response to the backlash and Twitter hate over Billie Eilish's supposed failure to pay respect to the shoulders on which she stands, Wolfgang Van Halen, the son of Eddie Van Halen and current bass player for Van Halen, tweeted back, quote, "Music is supposed to bring us together, not divide us. Listen to what you want and don't shame others for not knowing what you like." If you haven't heard of Billie Eilish, go check her out. She's cool. If you haven't heard of Van Halen, go check them out. They're cool too. Right on, Wolfgang. God, heaters in the background. Right on, Wolfgang. Billie is 18 years old, born 4 months after the attacks on September 11th. She grew up listening to Green Day, Avril Lavigne, and Justin Bieber. Those were the artists who made up her youth and will be forever associated with teenage dreams and concerns. And for the record, she's still in that phase. It would be absolutely ridiculous to expect her to have the same emotional connection with classic rock bands as we do. Art is incredibly subjective, and therein lies the beauty. There is art for everyone, and you're not required to listen, watch, or experience anything that doesn't move you. But within that fact is a wonderful opportunity to connect. Next time you're having a conversation with someone who expresses a love of music, movies, or art that is very different from your own, try this. You know, I've always been a insert their favorite. It didn't work. You know, I've always been a put your favorite thing here kind of person, and I've never really gotten into their favorite thing. What do you love about their favorite thing? For example, you know, I've always been a classic rock kind of person, and I've never really gotten into electronic music. What do you love about electronic music? If you're talking about music, find out if it's the lyrics, the instrumentation, the energy, or something else entirely that moves them. If it's movies, is it the script, the characters, the pacing, the tone, or the theme? Then, if this is someone you care about, make an effort. Search out that favorite art of theirs on your own time. Sit down and, without distractions, listen, watch, or experience it with their preferences in mind. You may not like it. In fact, you probably won't. The goal of connection is not agreement. It's understanding. Last major section. My stepfather, Kevin, used to drive me to high school every morning on my mom's days. The school was in my father's district, and the bus didn't come to my mom's neighborhood, so Kevin had to take me 30 minutes out of his way at the crack of dawn just to come straight back and drive even further to get himself to work. I didn't appreciate that at the time. Most mornings we would drive in silence, or occasionally he'd have the radio on in the background. But one day, I got a new CD from Sammy Hagar and the Wabaritas and asked if we could put it on during the commute. I knew he didn't want to because he regularly scoffed at my music tastes, preferring Norah Jones, jazz, and big band to Van Halen or The Who. He reluctantly agreed, and I enjoyed the album quietly in the background. Not the ideal way to listen to hard rock. And then went to school and to my dad's house for a couple of days. A few days later, back at my mom's, I hopped in the car at 6 a.m. with Kevin on a frigid winter morning in Buffalo, New York. To my surprise, he put on my Sammy Hagar album, which I'd accidentally left behind. I turned the car on the other day and forgot you had your CD in here, so I just decided to let it play, he said. You know, Sammy's got some great lyrics in these songs. Which track is your favorite? Go ahead, put it on. I was in shock. We listened to Sammy Hagar rock out for the next 30 minutes, chatting about various lyrics, guitar bits, and the energy of the album. It never happened again, and our relationship mostly maintained its state. It never happened again, and our relationship mostly maintained its shaky status quo. But for a brief window, Kevin saw me, and I'll always be grateful for that. And I'll always be grateful for that. And I'll always be grateful for that. As you can hear, I usually do a couple of takes on that last line to make sure I end the episode with the cadence and the tone that I want. At this point, I usually do the intro and outro for the episode, which is for these Thursday Thoughts ones on the podcast. They're very, very short. So here we go. Oh God, what's my intro for the podcast? I have different intros for everything. Hey, Brian Miller here, and welcome back to One New Person, the show where we take a close... No, that's for regular episodes. That's not what I do for this. Hey, Brian Miller here, and thanks so much for tuning into Thursday Thoughts on the One New Person podcast. This week's episode is called Neural Nostalgia and Musical Connection. Do that again, just in case. Hey, Brian Miller here, and thanks so much for tuning into Thursday Thoughts on the One New Person podcast. This week's episode is called Neural Nostalgia and Musical Connection. This week's episode is called Neural Nostalgia and Musical Connection. Well, that's it for this week. Thanks so much for tuning into Thursday Thoughts on the One New Person podcast. Remember, if you enjoy these, go to onenewperson.com and click the subscribe button on your favorite streaming service. It's free always, and then you'll get notified anytime I upload a new episode. We're in between 2 seasons right now, so we're basically just doing Thursday Thoughts episodes, which is an audio version of my blog. If you prefer text versions of blogs as opposed to what we're doing here, then feel free to head to humanconnection.blog and subscribe there. You'll get an email notification every week with the new blog post and also a link to the audio version should you prefer this one. And hey, if you know someone who would benefit or enjoy this episode, share it with them on social media and don't forget to tag us or use hashtag OneNewPerson, all spelled out so we can find you and thank you. I'm Brian Miller. This is One New Person, and we'll see you next time. All right, so that's basically the process that I go through to record the audio version of the blog or the audio Thursday Thoughts, whatever. This is basically what happens. I hope it was useful for you to actually see the behind the scenes of how many takes and when I stop and start and all the different things that might show up. Thanks so much for watching. My name's Brian Miller, and always remember that our world is a shared experience. Have a great day.